All right. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, and welcome. We are back here with more of Douglas Adams' Ultimate Hitchhiker Guide to the Galaxy. We are going to read from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's the first book in a 5-book series. We're going to do the first one. We'll finish this one out, but we are going to pick up where we left off at from last time. So if you haven't been following the story so far, definitely look back in the VODs. You should be able to catch all of them. We've done, I think this is our 3rd reading now. And I suspect we will be finishing this book up, not this session, but next session. So we've got about 2 more sessions left, and then we will be done with this book. So if you've missed anything, now's your chance to go back and catch up with the whole story. And if you haven't, pull up a chair, grab you a seat, and get comfortable. We are going to dive right into this. Let's throw up get off that screen. Where is that? There it is. There it is. That's the screen we were looking for. All right. Let's get started in on this. Chapter 16. Arthur awoke to the sounds of an argument and went to the bridge. Ford was waving his hands about. "You're crazy, Zaphod," he was saying. "Magrathea is a myth, a fairy tale. It's what parents tell their kids at night if they want them to grow up to become economists. And that's where we're currently in orbit about," insisted Zaphod. "Look, I can't help what you may personally be in orbit about," said Ford. "But this ship..." "Computer!" shouted Zaphod. "Oh, no." "Hi there, guys. This is Eddie, your onboard ship's computer, and I'm feeling just great, guys, and I know I'm just about to get a bundle of kicks out of any program you care to run through me." Arthur looked inquiringly at Trillian. She motioned him to come on in and keep quiet. "Computer," said Zaphod, "tell us what our present trajectory is." "A real solid pleasure, fellas," it burbled. "We are currently in orbit at an altitude of 3,000 miles around the legendary planet of Magrathea." "Proving nothing," said Ford. "I wouldn't trust that computer to speak my weight." "I sure can do that for you," enthused the computer, punching out more ticker tape. "I can even work out your personality problems to 10 decimal places if it will help." Jillian interrupted. "Zaphod," she said, "any minute now we will be swinging around to the daylight side of the planet, whatever it turns out to be." "Hey, what do you mean by that? The planet's where I predicted it would be, isn't it?" "Yes, I know there's a planet there. I'm not arguing with anyone. It's just that I wouldn't know Magrathea from any other lump of cold rock. Dawn's coming up if you want it." Okay, muttered Zaphod. "Let's at least get our eyes a good time. Computer!" "Hi there. What can I... Just shut up and give us the view of the planet again." A dark, featureless mass once more filled the screen, the planet rolling away beneath them. They watched for a moment in silence, but Zaphod was fidgeting with excitement. "We are now traversing the night side," he said in a hushed voice. The planet rolled on. "The surface of the planet is now 300 miles beneath us," he continued. He was trying to restore a sense of occasion to what he felt should have been a great moment. Magrathea. He was piqued by Ford's skeptical reaction. Magrathea. "In a few seconds," he continued, "we should see there." The moment carried itself. Even the most seasoned star tramp can't help but shiver at the spectacular drama of a sunrise seen from space. But a binary sunrise is one of the marvels of the galaxy. Out of the utter blackness stabbed a sudden point of blinding light. It crept by slight degrees and spread sideways in a thin crescent blade, and within 2 seconds, two suns were visible, furnaces of light searing the black edges of the horizon with bright fire. Fierce shafts of color streaked through the thin atmosphere beneath them. "The fires of dawn," breathed Zaphod. "The twin sons of Solinus and Ram." "Oh, whatever," said Ford quietly. "Solinus and Ram," insisted Zaphod. The suns blazed into the pitch of space, and a low, ghostly music floated through the bridge. Marvin was humming ironically because he hated humans so much. As Ford gazed at the spectacle of light before them, excitement burned inside of him, but only the excitement of seeing a strange new planet. It was enough for him to see it as it was. It faintly irritated him that Zaphod had to impose such a ludicrous fantasy onto the scene to make it work for him. All this Magrathian nonsense seemed juvenile. Isn't it enough to see a garden as beautiful without having to believe that there are fairies at the bottom of it? All this Magrathia business seemed totally incomprehensible to Arthur. He edged up to Trillian and asked her what was going on. "I only know what Zaphod told me," she whispered. "Apparently, Magrathia is some kind of legend from way back, which no one seriously believes in. A bit like Atlantis on Earth, except that the legends say Magrathia used to manufacture planets." Arthur blinked at the screen and felt he was missing something important. Suddenly, he realized what it was. "Is there any tea on this spaceship?" he asked. More of the planet was unfolding beneath them as the heart of gold streaked along its orbital path. The sun now stood high in the black sky. The pyrotechnics of dawn were over, and the surface of the planet appeared bleak and forbidding in the common light of day, gray, dusty, and only dimly contoured. It looked dead and cold as a crypt. From time to time, promising features would appear at the distant horizon. Ravines, maybe mountains, maybe even cities. But as they approached, the lines would soften and blur into anonymity, and nothing would transpire. The planet's surface was blurred by time, by the slow movement of the thin, stagnant air that had crept across it for century upon century. Clearly, it was very, very old. A moment of doubt came to Ford as he watched the gray landscape move beneath him. The immensity of time worried him. He could feel it. He could feel it as a presence. He cleared his throat. "Well, even supposing it is, said Zaphod. "Which it isn't," continued Ford. "What do you want with it anyways? There's nothing here." "Not on the surface," said Zaphod. "All right, just supposing there's something. I take it you're not here for the sheer industrial archaeology of it all. What are you after?" One of Zaphod's head looked away. The other one looked around to see what the first was looking at, but it wasn't looking at anything very much. "Well," said Zaphod airily, "it's partly the curiosity, partly a sense of adventure, but mostly I think mostly it's fame and money." Ford glanced at him sharply. He had a very strong impression that Zaphod hadn't the faintest idea why he was even there. "You know, I don't like the look of this planet at all," said Trillian. She's shivering. "Take no notice," said Zaphod. "With half the wealth of the former Galactic Empire stored in it somewhere, it can afford to look funny." Bullshit, thought Ford. Even supposing this was the home of some ancient civilization now gone to dust, even supposing a number of exceedingly unlikely things, there was no way that the vast treasures of wealth were going to be stored in there in any form that would still have meaning now. "I think it's just a dead planet," he said. "The suspense is killing me," said Arthur tersely. Stress and nervous tensions are now serious social problems in all parts of the galaxy. And it is in this order that the situation should not have in any way exacerbated the following facts that will now be revealed in advance. The planet in question is, in fact, the legendary Magrathea. The deadly missile attack shortly to be launched by an ancient automatic defense system will result merely in the breakage of 3 coffee cups and a mouse cage, the bruising of somebody's upper arm, and the ultimate creation and sudden demise of a bowl of petunias and the innocent sperm whale. In order that some sense of mystery should still be preserved, no revelations will yet be made concerning whose upper arm sustains the bruise. This fact may safely be made the subject of suspense, since it is no significance whatsoever. Chapter 17. After a fairly shaky start to the day, Arthur's mind was beginning to reassemble itself from the shell-shocked fragments of the previous day that had been left with him. He had found a nutrimatic machine which had provided him a plastic cup filled with a liquid that was almost but not entirely unlike tea. The way it functioned was very interesting. When the drink button was pressed, it made an instant but highly detailed examination of the subject's taste bud, a spectroscopic analysis of the subject's metabolism, and then sent tiny experimental signals down the neural pathways to the taste centers of the subject's brain to see what was likely to go down well. However, no one knew quite why it did this, because invariably it delivered a cup full of a liquid that was almost, but not quite entirely, unlike tea. The Nutrimatic was designed and manufactured by the Sirius Cybernetics Corporation, whose complaints department now covers all of the major landmasses on the first 3 planets in the Sirius Tau star system. Arthur drank the liquid and found it reviving. He glanced up at the screens again and watched a few more 100 miles of barren grayness slide past. It suddenly occurred to him to ask a question that had been bothering him. "Is it safe?" he asked. "Magrathea has been dead for about 5 million years," said Zaphod. "Of course it's safe. Even the ghosts will have settled down and raised families by now." At which point, a strange and inexplicable sound thrilled. Suddenly, through the bridge, a noise of a distant fanfare, a hollow, reedy, insubstantial sound. It preceded a voice that was equally hollow, reedy, insubstantial. The voice said, "Greetings to you." Someone from the dead planet was talking to them. "Computer!" shouted Zaphod. "Hi there. What the photon is it?" "Oh, just some 5 million year old tape that's been broadcast to us." "A what?" "A recording?" "Shush," said Ford. "It's carrying on." The voice was old, courteous, almost charming, but was underscored with a quite unmistakable menace. "This is a recorded announcement," it said. "As far as I'm afraid we're all out at the moment. The Commercial Council of Magrathea thanks you for your esteemed visit." "A voice from ancient Magrathea," shouted Zaphod. Okay, said Ford. "But regrets," continued the voice, "that the entire planet is temporarily closed for business. Thank you. If you would care to leave your name and address a planet where you can be contacted, kindly speak when you hear the tone." A short buzz followed, and then silence. They want to get rid of us, said Trillian nervously. What do we do? It's just a recording, said Zaphod. We keep going. Got that, computer? I got it, said the computer, and gave the ship an extra kick of speed. They waited. After a second or so, the fanfare came on again, and then the voice. We would like to assure you that as soon as our business is resumed, announcements will be made in all the fashionable magazines and color supplements, when our clients can once again be able to select from all the best contemporary geography. The menace in the voice took on a sharper edge. Meanwhile, we thank our clients for their kind interest and would ask them to leave now. Arthur looked around the nervous faces of his companions. Well, I suppose we better get going, hadn't we? He suggested. Shush, said Zaphod. There's absolutely nothing to be worried about. Then why is everyone so tense? They're just interested, shouted Zaphod. Computer, start descent into the atmosphere and prepare for landing. This time the fanfare was quite perfunctory. The voice now distinctly cold. It is most gratifying, it said, that your enthusiasm for our planet continues unabated. And so we would like to assure you that the guided missiles currently converging with your ship are a part of a special service we extend to all of our most enthusiastic clients. And the fully armed nuclear warheads are, of course, merely a courtesy detail. We look forward to your custom in future lives. Thank you. The voice snapped off. Said Trillian. Said Arthur. Well, said Ford. Look, said Zaphod, will you get it into your heads that that's just a recorded message? It's millions of years old. It doesn't apply to us. Get it? What? Said Trillian quietly. What about the missiles? Missiles? Don't make me laugh. Ford tapped Zaphod on the shoulder and pointed at the rear screen. Clear in the distance behind them, 2 silver darts were climbing through the atmosphere towards the ship. A quick change of magnification brought them into close focus. 2 massively real rockets thundered through the sky. The suddenness of it was shocking. I think they're going to have a good try at applying it to us, said Ford. Zaphod stared at them in astonishment. Hey, this is terrific, he said. Someone down there's trying to kill us. Terrific, said Arthur. But don't you see what this means? Yeah, we're going to die. Yes, but apart from that. Apart from what? It means we must be onto something. How soon can we get off? Second by second, the image of the missiles on the screens grew larger. They had swung around now to a direct homing course so that all could be seen of them was the warheads, head on. As a matter of interest, said Trillian, what are we going to do? Just a second. Keep cool, said Zaphod. Is that all? Shh, said Arthur. No, we're going to, take evasive action, said Zaphod with a sudden access of panic. Computer, what evasive actions can we take? None, I'm afraid, guys, said the computers. Or something, says Zaphod. He said. There seems to be something jammed in my guidance system, explained the computer brightly. Impact minus 45 seconds. Please call me Eddie. It will help you to better relax. Zaphod tried to run in several equally decisive directions simultaneously. Right, he said. We got to get manual control of this ship. Can you fly her? Asked Ford pleasantly. No. Can you? No. Trillian, can you? No. Fine, said Zaphod, relaxing. We'll do it together. I can't either, said Arthur, who felt it was time he began to assert himself. I'd guess that, said Zaphod. Okay, computer. I want full manual control now. You got it, said the computer. Several large desk panels slid open and a bank of control consoles sprang up out of them, showering the crew with bits of expanded polystyrene packaging and balls of rolled up cellophane. These controls had never been used before. Zaphod stared at them wildly. Okay, Ford, he said. Full thrusters and 10 degrees starboard, or something. Good luck, boys, chirped the computer. Impact minus 30 seconds. Ford leapt to the controls. Only a few of them made any immediate sense to him, so he pulled those. The ship shook and screamed as its guidance rockets jets tried to push it in every which way simultaneously. He released half of them, and the ship spun around in a tight arc, heading back in the direction it had come, straight towards the oncoming missiles. Air cushions ballooned out of the walls in an instant as everyone was thrown against them. For a few seconds, the inertial forces held them flattened, squirming for breath, unable to move. Zaphod struggled, pushed in manic depression, and finally managed a savage kick at a small lever that formed part of the guidance system. The lever snapped off. The ship twisted sharply and rocketed upwards. The crew were hurled violently back across the cabin. Ford's copy of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy smashed into another section of the control console, with the combined result that the guide started to explain to anyone who cared to listen about the best ways of smuggling Antarian parakeet glands out of Antares. An Antarian parakeet gland stuck on a small stick is a revolting but much sought-after cocktail delicacy, and very large sums of money are often paid for them by rich idiots who want to impress other very rich idiots. The ship suddenly dropped out of the sky like a stone. It was, of course, more or less at this moment that one of the crew sustained a nasty bruise to the upper arm. This should be emphasized because, as has already been revealed, they escape otherwise completely unharmed, and the deadly nuclear missiles do not eventually hit the ship. The safety of the crew is absolutely assured. Impact in 20 seconds, guys, said the computer. Then turn the bloody engines back on, bawled Zaphod. Oh, sure, guys, said the computer, and with a subtle roar, the engines cut back in. The ship smoothly flattened out of its dive and headed back towards the missiles again. The computer started to sing. When you walk through the storm, it whined nasally, hold your head up high. Zaphod screamed at it to shut up, but his voice was lost in the din of what they quite naturally assumed was the approaching destruction. And don't be afraid of the dark, Eddie wailed. The ship, in flattening out, had in fact flattened out upside down, and lying on the ceiling as they all were, it was now totally impossible for any of the crew to reach the guidance system. At the end of the storm, crooned Eddie. The two missiles loomed massively on the screen as they thundered towards the ship. Is a golden sky. But by an extraordinary lucky chance that they had not yet fully corrected their flight paths to that of the erratically weaving ship, they passed right underneath of it. And the sweetest silver song of the lark. Revised impact time, 15 seconds, fellas. Walk on through the wind. The missiles banked around in a screeching arc. and plunged back in pursuit. "This is it," said Arthur, watching them. "We are now quite definitely going to die, aren't we?" "I wish you'd stop saying that," shouted Ford. "Well, we are, aren't we?" "Yeah." "Walk on through the rain," sang Eddie. A thought struck Arthur. He struggled to his feet. "Why doesn't anyone turn on this improbability drive thingy?" he said. "We could probably reach that." "What, are you crazy?" said Zaphod. "Without proper programming, anything could happen." "Does that matter at this stage?" shouted Arthur. "Through your dream by tossed down and blown," sang Eddie. Arthur scrambled up to one of the excitingly chunky pieces of molded contouring where the curve of the wall met the ceiling. Walk on with the hope in your heart." Does anyone know why Arthur can't turn on the improbability drive?" shouted Trillian. "And you'll never walk alone. Impact minus 5 seconds. It's been great knowing you, fellas. God bless. You'll never walk alone." "I said," yelled Trillian, "does anyone know?" The next thing that happened was a mind-mingling explosion of noise and light. Chapter 18. And the next thing that happened after that was that the Heart of Gold continued on its way, perfectly normal, with a rather fetchingly redesigned interior. It was somewhat larger and done out in delicate pastel shades of green and blue. In the center, a spiral staircase leading nowhere in particular stood in a spray of ferns and yellow flowers, and next to it a stone sundial pedestal housed the main computer terminal. Cunningly deploying lights and mirrors created the illusion of standing in a conservatory overlooking a wide stretch of existing manicured garden. Around the periphery of the conservatory area stood marble-top tables on intricately beautifully wrought iron legs. As you gazed around on the polished surfaces of the marble, the vague forms of the instruments became visible. And as you touched them, the instruments materialized instantly under your hand. Looked at from the correct angles, the mirrors appeared to reflect all the required data readouts, though it was far from clear where they were reflecting from. It was in fact sensationally beautiful. Relaxing in a wickerwork sun chair, Zaphod Beeblebrock said, "What the hell happened?" "Well, I was just saying," said Arthur, lounging by a small fishbowl. "There's this improbability drive switch over here." He waved at where he had been. There was a potted plant there now. "But where are we?" said Ford, who was sitting in the spiral staircase, a nicely chilled pan-galactic gargle blaster in his hand. "Exactly where we were, I think," said Trillian. As well as all about them, the mirror suddenly showed them an image of the blighted landscape of Magrathea, which still scooted along beneath them. Zaphod leapt out of his seat. "Then what happened to the missiles?" he said. A new and astounding image appeared in the mirrors. "They would appear," said Ford doubtfully, "to have turned into a bowl of petunias and a very surprised-looking whale." "At an improbability factor," cut in Eddie, who hadn't changed a bit, "of 8,767,128 to 1 against." Zaphod stared at Arthur. "Did you think of that, Earthman?" he demanded. "Well," said Arthur, "all I did was..." "That's very good thinking, Turn on the improbability drive for a second without first activating the proofing screen. Hey, kid, you just saved our lives. You know that?" "Oh," said Arthur. "Well, it was nothing really." "Was it?" said Zaphod. "Oh, well, forget it then. Okay, computer, take us to the land." "But..." "I said forget it." Another thing that had gotten forgotten was the fact that against all probability, a sperm whale had suddenly been called into existence several miles above the surface of an alien planet. And since this was not a naturally tenable position for a whale, this poor innocent creature had very little time to come to terms with its identity as a whale before it had come to terms with not being a whale anymore. This is a complete record of its thoughts from the moment it began its life to the moment it ended. "Ah, what's happening?" it thought. "Oh, excuse me, who am I? Hello? Why, I'm here. What's my purpose in life? What do I mean by who am I?" Calm down, get a grip now. Oh, this is an interesting sensation. Well, what is it? It's a sort of yawning, tingling sensation in my... Well, I suppose I should better start finding names for the things if I want to make any headway in what, for the sake of what I shall call an argument, I shall call the world. Let's call it my stomach. Good. Ooh, it's getting quite strong. And hey, what about this whistling, roaring sound going past what I'm suddenly going to call my head? Yeah, perhaps I can call it that. Wind. Ooh, that's a good name. It'll do. Perhaps I can find a better name for it later when I found out what it's for. It must be something very important because there certainly seems to be a whole hell of a lot of it. Hey, what's this thing? This, let's call it tail. Yeah, that's it. Tail. Hey, I can really thrash it about pretty good, can't I? Wow, that feels great. Doesn't seem to achieve very much, but I'll probably find out what it's for later on. Now I have built up any coherent picture of things yet? No. Never mind. Hey, this is really exciting. So much to find out about, so much to look forward to. I am quite dizzy with anticipation. Or is it the wind? There really was a lot of that now, isn't there? And wow, hey, what is this thing suddenly coming at me for very fast, very, very fast? So big and flat and round. It needs a big, wide-sounding name like round, ground. That's it. That's a good name, ground. I wonder if it will be friends with me. And the rest, after a sudden wet thud, was silence. Curiously enough, the only thing that went through the mind of the bowl of petunias as it fell was, "Oh no, not again." Many people have speculated that if we knew exactly why the bowl of petunias had thought that, we would know a lot more about the nature of the universe than we do now. Chapter 19. "Are we taking this robot with us?" said Ford, looking with distaste at Marvin, who was standing in an awkward hunched posture in the corner under a small palm tree. Zaphod glanced away from the mirrored screens, which presented a panoramic view of the blighted landscape on which the Heart of Gold had now landed. "Oh, the paranoid android?" he said. "Yeah, we'll take him." "But what are you supposed to do with a manically depressed robot?" "You think you've got problems," said Marvin, as if addressing a newly occupied coffin. "What are you supposed to do if you were already a manically depressed robot? No, don't bother answering that. I'm 50,000 times more intelligent than you, and even I don't know what to do with the answer. It gives me a headache just trying to think down to your level." Trillian burst in through the door from her cabin. "My white mice have escaped." An expression of deep worry and concern failed to cross either of Zaphod's faces. "Nuts to your white mice," he said. Trillian glared an upset glare at him and then disappeared again. It is possible that her remark would have commanded greater attention had it been generally realized that human beings were only the third most intelligent life form present on the planet Earth, instead of, as was generally thought by most independent observers, the second. "Good afternoon, boys." The voice was oddly familiar, but oddly different. It had a matriarchal twang to it. It announced itself to the crew as they arrived at the airlock hatchway that would let them out onto the planet. They looked at each other in puzzlement. "It's the computer," explained Zaphod. "I discovered it had an emergency backup personality I thought might work out better." "Now, this is going to be your first day on a strange new planet," continued Eddie's new voice. "So I want you all to wrap up snugly and warm and no playing with any naughty bug-eyed monsters." Zaphod tapped impatiently on the hatch. "I'm sorry," he said. "I think we might be better off with a slide ruler." "Right," snapped the computer. "Who said that?" "Will you open the exit hatch, please, computer?" said Zaphod, trying not to get angry. "Not until whoever says that owns up," urged the computer, stamping a few synapses close. "Oh, God," muttered Ford, slumped against the bulkhead. He started to count to 10. He was desperately worried that one day sentient life forms would forget how to do this. Only by counting could humans demonstrate their independence of computers. "Come on," said Eddie sturdily. "Computer," began Zaphod. "I'm waiting," interrupted Eddie. "I can wait all day if necessary." "Computer," said Zaphod again, who had been trying to think of some subtle piece of reasoning to put the computer down with, and had decided not to bother competing with it on its own ground. "If you don't open that exit hatch this minute, I shall zap straight off to your major databanks and reprogram you with a large axe. Got it?" Eddie, shocked, paused, considered this. Ford carried on counting quietly. This was about the most aggressive things you can do to a computer, the equivalent of going up to a human being saying, "Blood, blood, blood, blood." Finally, Eddie said quietly, "I can see where this relationship is something we're going to have to work at." And the hatchway opened. An icy wind ripped into them. They hugged themselves warmly and stepped down the ramp and onto the barren dust of Magrathea. "It'll all end in tears, I just know it," shouted Eddie after them, and closed the hatchway again. A few minutes later, he opened and closed the hatchway again in response to a command that caught him entirely by surprise. Chapter 20. 5 figures wandered slowly over the blighted land. Bits of it were dullish gray, bits of it dullish brown, and the rest of it rather less interesting to look at. It was like a dried-out marsh, now barren of all vegetation and covered with a layer of dust about an inch thick. It was very, very cold. Zaphod was clearly depressed. Was very depressed about it. He stalked off by himself and soon was lost to sight behind a slight rise in the ground. The wind stung at Arthur's eyes and ears, and the stale, thin air clasped his throat. However, the thing that stung the most was his mind. "It's fantastic," he said. His own voice rattled in his ear. Sound carried badly in this thin atmosphere. "Desolate hole, if you ask me," said Ford. "I could have more fun in a cat litter box." He felt some mounting irritation of all the planets in all the star systems of all the galaxies. Many wild, exotic, seething with life. Didn't he just have to turn up on a dump like this after 15 years of being a castaway? Not even a hot dog stand in existence. He stooped down, picked up a cold clod of earth, but there was nothing under it. Nothing worth crossing thousands of light years to look at. No, insisted Arthur. Don't you understand? This is the first time I've actually stood on the surface of another planet. A whole alien world. Pity it's such a dump, though. Trillian hugged herself, shivering, and frowned. She could have sworn she saw a slight and unexpected movement out the corner of her eye, but when she glanced in that direction, all she could see was the ship, still and silent, 100 yards or so behind them. She was relieved when a second or so later they caught sight of Zaphod standing on top of the ridge of ground and waving them to come and join him. He seemed to be excited, but they couldn't clearly hear what he was saying because of the thinnish atmosphere and the wind. As they approached the ridge of a higher ground, they became aware that it seemed to be circular, a crater about 150 yards wide. Round the outside of the crater, the sloping ground was splattered with black and red lumps. They stopped and looked at a piece. It was wet. It was rubbery. With horror, they suddenly realized that it was fresh whale meat. At the top of the crater's lip, they met Zaphod. "Look," he said, pointing into the crater. In the center lay the exploded carcass of a lonely sperm whale that hadn't lived long enough to be disappointed with its lot. The silence was only disturbed by the slight, involuntary spasm of Trillian clearing her throat. "I suppose there's no point in trying to bury it," murmured Arthur. And then he wished he hadn't. "Come," said Zaphod, starting back down into the crater. "What, down there?" said Trillian with severe distaste. "Yeah," said Zaphod. "Come on, I've got to show you something." "We can see it," said Trillian. "Not that," said Zaphod. "Something else, come on." They all hesitated. "Come on," insisted Zaphod. "I found a way in." "In?" said Arthur in horror. "Into the interior of the planet, an underground passage. The force of the whale impacted cracked it open. And that's where we have to go, where no man has trod these 5 million years, into the very depths of time itself." Marvin started his ironic humming again. Zaphod hit him, and he shut up. With little shudders of disgust, they all followed Zaphod down the incline into the crater, trying very hard to avoid looking at its unfortunate creator. "Life," said Marvin dolefully. "Loathe it or ignore it, you can't like it." The ground had caved in where the whale had hit it, revealing a network of galleries and passages now largely obstructed by collapsed rubble and entrails. Zaphod had made a start clearing a way into one of them, but Marvin was able to do it rather faster. Dank air wafted out of the dark recesses, and as Zaphod shone a flashlight into it, little was visible in the dusty gloom. "According to legends," he said, "the Magrathians live most of their lives underground." "Why is that?" said Arthur. "Did the surface become too polluted or overpopulated?" "No, I don't think so," said Zaphod. "I think they just didn't like it very much." "And are you sure you know what you're doing?" said Trillian, peering nervously into the darkness. "We've been attacked once already, you know." "Look, kid, I promise you the live population of this planet is nil plus. The 4 of us, so come on, let's go in there. Hey, Earthman." "Arthur," said Arthur. "Yeah, could you just sort of keep this robot with you and guard this end of the passageway, okay?" "Guard?" said Arthur. "What from? You just said there was no one here." "Yeah, well, just for safety then, okay?" Whose? Yours or mine?
Good lad. Okay, here we go.
Zaphod scrambled down into the passage, followed by Trillian and Ford.
Well, I hope you all have a really miserable time, complained Arthur.
Don't worry, Marvin assured him. They will. Arthur stamped around in a huff, and then decided that a whale's graveyard is not on the whole a good place to stamp around in. Marvin eyed him balefully for a moment, and then turned himself off. Zaphod marched quickly down the passageway, nervous as hell, but trying to hide it by striding purposefully. He flung the beam around. The walls were covered in dark tiles and were cold to the touch, the air thick with decay.
There! What did I tell you? He said. An inhabited planet, Magrathea.
He strode on through the dirt and debris that littered the tile floor. Trillian was reminded unavoidably of the London Underground, though it was thoroughly less squalid. At intervals along the walls, the tiles gave way to large mosaics, simple angular patterns in bright colors. Trillian stopped and studied one of them, but could not interpret or any sense in them. She called Zaphod.
Hey, have you any idea what these strange symbols are? I think they're just strange symbols of some sorts,
said Zaphod, hardly glancing back. Trillian shrugged and hurried after him. From time to time, a doorway led either to the left or to the right in smallish chambers, which Ford discovered to be full of derelict computer equipment. He dragged Zaphod into one of them to have a look. Trillian followed.
Look, said Ford. You reckon this is Magrathea?
Yeah, said Zaphod.
And we heard the voice, right? Okay, so I bought the fact that this is Magrathea for the moment. What you've said so far said nothing about how in the galaxy you found it. You didn't just look it up. In the Star Atlas, that's for darn sure. Research. Government archives, detective works, a few lucky guesses, easy. And then you stole the heart of gold to come here and look for it? I stole the heart of gold to look for a lot of things. A lot of things, said Ford in surprise. Like what? I don't know. What? I don't know what I'm looking for. What now? Because I think it might be better. Or I think it might be because if I knew, I wouldn't be able to look for them. Are you crazy? It's a possibility. I haven't ruled it out yet, said Zaphod. I only know as much about myself as my mind can work out under its current conditions, and its current conditions aren't very good.
For a long time, nobody said anything as Ford gazed at Zaphod with a mind suddenly full of worry.
Listen, old friend, if you want to, started Ford evenly. No, wait. I'll tell you something, said Zaphod. I freewheel a lot. I get an idea to go do something, and I say, hey, why not? I do it. I reckon I'll become president of the galaxy, and it just happens. It's easy. I decide to steal this ship. I decided to look for Magrathea, and it all just happens. Yeah, I worked out how it can be best done, right? But it always works out. It's like having a galactic credit card, which keeps on working, though you never send off the checks. And then, whenever I stop to think, why did I want to do something? How did I work out how to do it? I get a very strong desire to just stop thinking about it. Like I have right now. It's a big effort to even talk about it.
Zaphod paused for a while. For a while, there was silence. Then he frowned and said,
Last night, I was worried about this again. About the fact that part of my mind just didn't seem to work properly. Then it occurred to me that the way it seemed to work was that someone else was using my mind to have a good idea with, without telling me about it. I put the two ideas together and decided that maybe that somebody had locked off part of my mind for that purpose. which was why I couldn't use it. I wondered if there was a way I could check. So I went to the ship's medical bay, plugged myself into the encephalographic screen, and I went through every major screening test on both of my heads. All the tests I had to go through under government medical officers before my nomination for presidency could be properly ratified. They showed up nothing. Nothing unexpected, at least. They showed that I was clever, imaginative, irresponsible, untrustworthy, extrovert, nothing you couldn't have guessed, and no other anomalies. So I started inventing further tests, completely at random. Nothing. Then I tried superimposing the results from one head on top of the results from the other head. Still, nothing. Finally, I got silly because I'd given it up as nothing more than an attack of paranoia. Last thing I did before I packed it all in was to take the superimposed picture and look at it through a green filter. You remember, I always had a superstition about the color green. When I was a kid, I always wanted to be a pilot on one of those trading scouts.
Ford nodded.
And there it was, said Zaphod, clear as day, a whole section of the middle of both brains that related only to each other and not to anything else around them. Some bastard had cauterized all the synapses and electronically traumatized those two lumps of cerebellum.
Ford stared at him aghast. Trillian turned white.
Somebody did that to you? Yeah. But have you any idea who or why? Why, I can only guess. But I do know who the bastard was. You know. How do you know? Because they left their initials burned into the cauterized synapses that they left them there for me to see.
Ford stared at him in horror and felt his skin begin to crawl.
Initials? Burned into your brain? Yeah. Well, what were they, for God's sakes?
Zaphod looked at him in silence again for a moment, then looked away.
Z, B, that's right. Z, B,
he said quietly. At that moment, a steel shutter slammed down behind them, and gas started to pour into the chamber.
I'll tell you about it later,
choked Zaphod, as all three of them passed out. All right. I'll get me a little drink here. I hope you guys are enjoying your lovely little story tonight. Well, light speed too slow. Thank you for the resub wars. Welcome in. You are a little late. We've been adventuring around the grounds of Magrathea, and you've missed the great Petunia joke, but that's all right. It's only about an hour late now. It's all right. You can go back and rewatch it. Welcome in. Chapter 21. On the surface of Magrathea, Arthur wandered about moodily. Ford had thoughtfully left him his copy of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy to while away the time with. He pushed a few buttons at random. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is a very unevenly edited book and contains many passages that seem to be simply seemed to its editors like a good idea at the time. One of these, the one Arthur now came across, supposedly relates to the experiences of one of the Vit Vujag, a quiet young student at the University of Maximegalon, who pursued a brilliant academic career studying ancient philology, transformational ethics, and the wave harmonic theory of historical perception. And then, after a night of drinking pan-galactic gargle blasters with Zaphod Beetlebrox, became increasingly obsessed with the problem of what had happened to all the ballpoint pens he'd ever bought over the past few years. There followed a long period of painstaking research during which he visited all the major centers of ballpoint loss throughout the galaxy and eventually came up with a quaint little theory which quite caught the public imagination at the time. Somewhere in the cosmos, he said, along with all the planets inhabited by humanoids, reptiloids, fishoids, and walking treeoids, in super intelligent shades of colors of blue, there was also a planet entirely given over to ballpoint lifeforms. And it was on this planet to which unattended ballpoint pens would make their way, slipping quietly through wormholes in space to a world where they knew they could enjoy a uniquely ballpoint lifestyle, responding to highly ballpoint-orientated stimuli and generally leading the ballpoint equivalent of a good life. And as theories go, this was all very fine and pleasant until HHG2G suddenly claimed to have found this planet, and to have worked there for a while driving a limousine for a family of cheap, green retractables, whereupon he was taken away, locked up, wrote a book, and was finally sent into tax exile, which is usually the fate reserved for those who are determined to make fools of themselves in public. When one day an expedition was sent to the spatial coordinates that HHG had claimed for this planet, they discovered only a small asteroid inhabited by a solitary old man who claimed repeatedly that nothing was true, though he was later discovered to be lying. There did, however, remain the question of both the mysterious 60,000 Altarian dollars paid yearly into his Brandsvogen bank account, and of course Zaphod Beeblebrox's highly profitable second-hand ballpoint business. Arthur read this and put the book down. The robot still sat there, completely inert. Arthur got up, walked to the top of the crater, walked around the crater, watched the two suns set magnificently over Magrathea, went back down into the crater, woke the robot up because even a manic, depressed robot is better to talk to than nobody. "Night's falling," he said. "Look, robot, the stars are coming out." From the heart of a dark nebula, it is possible to see very few stars, and only very faintly, but they could still be seen. The robot obediently looked at them, then looked back. "I know," he said. "Wretched, isn't it? But that sunset, I've never seen anything like it in my wildest dreams. The two suns, it was like mountains of fire boiling into space." "I've seen it," said Marvin. "It's rubbish. We only ever had the one sun at home," persevered Arthur. "I came from a planet called Earth, you know." "I know," said Marvin. "You keep going on about it, and it sounds awful." "Oh no, it was a beautiful place." "Did it have an ocean?" "Oh yes," said Arthur with a sigh. "Great wide rolling blue oceans." "I can't bear oceans." "Tell me," inquired Arthur, "do you get on well with other robots?" "I hate them." "Where are you going?" "I think I'll just take another walk," he said. "Don't blame you," said Marvin, and counted 597 billion sheep before falling asleep again, a second later. Arthur slapped his arms about himself to get his circulation a little bit more enthusiastic about its job. He trudged back up the wall of the crater, Because the atmosphere was so thin, and because there was no moon, nightfall was very rapid, and it was by now very dark. Because of this, Arthur practically walked into the old man before he noticed him. Chapter 22. He was standing with his back to Arthur, watching the very last glimmers of light sink into the blackness behind the horizon. He was tallish, elderly, and dressed in a single long gray robe. When he turned, his face was thin, distinguished, careworn, but not unkind, the sort of face you would happily bank with. But he didn't turn yet, not even to react to Arthur's yelp of surprise. Eventually, the last rays of the sun vanished completely, and he turned, his face still illuminated from somewhere. And when Arthur looked for the source of the light, he saw that a few yards away stood a small craft of some kind. A small hovercraft, Arthur guessed. It shed a dim pool of light around it. The man looked at Arthur. Sadly, it seemed.
You chose a cold night to visit our dead planet, he said. Who are you? Said Arthur. The man looked away again. A look of sadness seemed to come across his face. My name is not important, he said. He seemed to have something on his mind. Conversation was clearly something he felt he didn't have to rush at. Arthur felt awkward. You startled me, he said lamely. The man looked around to him again, slightly raised his eyebrows. He said. I said you startled me. Don't be alarmed. I will not hurt you. I will not harm you.
Arthur frowned at him.
But you shot at us. There were missiles.
The man gazed into the pit of the crater. The slight glow from Marvin's eyes cast very faint red shadows on the huge carcass of the whales. The man chuckled slightly.
An automatic system, he said, and gave a small sigh. Ancient computers ranged in the bowels of the planet, ticking away the millennium, and the ages hang heavily on their dusty databanks. I think they just take the occasional potshot at things just to relieve the monotony.
He looked closely at Arthur and said,
I'm a great fan of science, you know.
Oh, really? Said Arthur, who was beginning to find the man's curious, kindly manner disconcerting.
Oh, yes,
said the man, and simply stopped talking. Said Arthur. He had an odd feeling of being like a man in the act of an adultery who is surprised when the woman's husband wanders into the room, changes his trousers, passes a few idle remarks about the weather, and leaves again.
You seem ill at ease, said the old man with polite concern. Well, no, yeah, actually, you see, we weren't really expecting to find anybody. In fact, I sort of gathered you were all dead or something. Dead? Said the old man. Good gracious me, no. We have but slept.
Slept, said Arthur incredulously.
Yes, through the economic recession, you see,
said the old man, apparently unconcerned about whether Arthur understood a word he was talking about or not. Arthur had to prompt him again.
Economic recession? Well, you see, 5 million years ago, the galactic economy collapsed. And seeing that custom-built planets are something of a luxury commodity, you see...
He paused and looked at Arthur.
You do know we build planets, don't you?
he asked sullenly.
Well, yeah, said Arthur. I sort of gathered. Fascinating trade, said the old man, and a wistful look came across his eyes. Doing the coastline was always my favorite. Used to have endless fun doing little bits of fjords. So anyways, he said, trying to find his thread again, the recession came and we decided it would save a lot of bother if we just slept through it. So we reprogrammed the computers to revive us when it was all over.
The old man stifled a very slight yawn and continued.
The computers were index linked to the galactic stock market prices, you see, so that we'd all be revived when everyone else had rebuilt the economy enough to afford our rather expensive services.
Arthur, a regular Guardian reader, was deeply shocked at this.
That's a pretty unpleasant way to behave, isn't it?
Is it?
Asked the old man mildly. I'm sorry. I'm a bit out of touch.
He pointed down to the crater.
Is that robot yours?
No, came a thin metallic voice from the crater. I'm mine. If you'd call it a robot, said Arthur, it's more sort of an electronic sulking machine.
Bring it,
said the old man. Arthur was quite surprised to hear a note of decision suddenly present in the old man's voice. He called to Marvin, who crawled up the slope, making a big show of being lame, which he wasn't.
On second thought, said the old man, leave it here. You must come with me. Great things are afoot.
He turned toward his craft, which, though no apparent signal had been given, now drifted quietly towards him through the dark. Arthur looked down at Marvin, who now made an equally big show of turning round laboriously and trudging off down into the crater again, muttering sour nothings to himself.
Come, said the old man. Come now, or you will be late.
Late, said Arthur.
Late for what? What is your name, human?
Dent. Arthur Dent, said Arthur.
Late, as in the late Dent, Arthur Dent, said the old man sternly. It is sort of a threat, you see.
Another wistful look came into his tired eyes.
I've never really been good at them myself. I'm told they can be very effective.
Arthur blinked at him. What an extraordinary person, he muttered to himself.
I beg your pardon,
said the old man. Oh, nothing. I'm sorry, said Arthur, embarrassed. All right, where do we go?
In my air car,
said the old man, motioning Arthur to get into the craft which had been settled silently next to them.
We are going deep into the bowels of the planet, where even now our race is being revived from its 5 million slumber. Magrathea awakes.
Arthur shivered involuntarily as he seated himself next to the old man. The strangeness of it, the silent bobbing movement of the craft as it soared into the night sky, quite unsettled him. He looked at the old man, his face illuminated by the dull glow of tiny lights on the instrument panel. Excuse me, he said to him. What is your name, by the way?
My name,
said the old man. And the same distant sadness came onto his face again. He paused.
My name,
he said,
is Slutty Breakfast.
Arthur practically choked.
I beg your pardon? Slutty Breakfast,
repeated the old man quietly.
Slarty Bartfast?
The old man looked at him gravely.
I said it wasn't important,
he said. The air car sailed silently through the night. Chapter 23. It is an important and popular fact that things are not always what they seem. For instance, on the planet Earth, man has always assumed that he was more intelligent than dolphins because he had achieved so much: the wheel, New York, wars, and so on. While all dolphins had ever done was muck about in the water having a good time. But conversely, the dolphins had always believed that they were far more intelligent than man for precisely the same reason. Curious enough, the dolphins had long known of the impending destruction of the planet Earth and had made many attempts to alert mankind to the dangers. Most of their communications were misinterpreted as amusing attempts to punch footballs or whistle for tidbits, so they eventually gave up and left Earth by their own means shortly before the Vogons arrived. The last ever dolphin message was misinterpreted as a surprisingly sophisticated attempt to do a double backward somersault through a hoop while whistling the Star-Spangled Banner. But in fact, the message was this: so long, and thanks for all the fish. In fact, there was only one species on the planet more intelligent than dolphins, and they spent a lot of their time in behavioral research laboratories running around inside of wheels and conducting frighteningly elegant and subtle experiments on man. The fact, once again, man completely misinterpreted this relationship was entirely according to these creatures' plans. I love these small chapters. All right. Chapter 24. Silently, the air car coasted through the cold darkness. A single soft glow of light that was utterly alone in the deep Magrathian night. It sped swiftly. Arthur's companion seemed sunk in his own thoughts, and when Arthur tried on a couple of occasions to engage him in conversation again, he would simply reply by asking if he was comfortable enough, and then left it at that. Arthur tried to gauge the speed at which they were traveling, but the blackness outside was absolute, and he was denied any reference points. The sense of motion was so soft and slight he could almost believe that they were hardly moving at all. Then a tiny glow of light appeared in the far distance, and within seconds had grown so much in size that Arthur realized it was traveling towards them at colossal speed. He tried to make out what sort of craft it might be. He peered at it, but was unable to discern any clear shape, and suddenly gasped in alarm as the air car dipped sharply and headed downwards in what seemed certain to be a collision course. Their relative velocity seemed unbelievable, and Arthur had hardly time to draw a breath before it was all over. The next thing he was aware of was an insane silver blur that seemed to surround him. He twisted his head sharply round and saw a small black point dwindling rapidly in the distance behind them, and it took him several seconds to realize what had happened. They had plunged into a tunnel in the ground. The colossal speed had been their own relative. The colossal speed had been their own relative to the glow of light, which was a stationary hole in the ground, the mouth of the tunnel. The insane blur of silver was the circular wall of the tunnel down which they were shooting, apparently at several hundred miles an hour. He closed his eyes in terror. After a length of time which he made no attempt to judge, he sensed a slight subsidence in their speed. Some while later became aware that they were gradually gliding to a gentle halt. He opened his eyes again. They were still in the silver tunnel, threading and weaving their way through what appeared to be a crisscross warren of converging tunnels. When they finally stopped, it was in a small chamber of curved steel. Several tunnels had also had their termini here, and at the farthest end of the chamber, Arthur could see a large circle of dim, irritating light. It was irritating because it played tricks with the eyes. It was impossible to focus on properly or tell how near or far it was. Arthur guessed, quite wrongly, that it might be ultraviolet. Slarty Bartfast turned and regarded Arthur with his solemn eyes. "Earthman," he said, "we are now deep, deep in the heart of Megrithia." "How did you know I was an Earthman?" demanded Arthur. "These things will become clear to you," said the old man gently. "At least," he added with a slight doubt in his voice, "clearer than they are at the moment." He continued, "I should warn you that the chamber we are about to pass into does not literally exist within our planet. Welcome on in, Raiders. Pull up a chair. We are deep in our book, and you are welcome to stay and listen. Thank you for the raid, Resilient Gamer and Pirate Boy. I should warn you that the chamber we are about to pass into does not literally exist within our planet. It is a little too large. We are about to pass through a gateway into a vast tract of hyperspace. It may disturb you." Arthur made nervous noises. Pirate Boy, we are still in the middle of our Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. We just crossed chapter 24. I think we've got about maybe this stream and next stream, and that will probably be the end of this book. So 3 Nori streams up. There you go. Slarty Bartfast touched a button and added, not entirely reassuring, "It will scare the willies out of me. Hold tight." The car shot forward straight into the circle of light, and suddenly Arthur had a fairly clear idea of what infinity looked like. It wasn't infinity. In fact, infinity itself looked flat and uninteresting. Looking up into the night sky is looking into infinity. Distance is incomprehensible and therefore meaningless. The chamber into which the air car emerged was anything but infinite. It was just very, very, very big. So big that it gave the impression of infinity far better than infinity did itself. Arthur's senses bobbed and spun. Traveling at immense speed, he knew the air car attained. They climbed slowly through the open air, leaving the gateway through which they had passed an invisible pinprick in the shimmering wall behind them. The wall. The wall defied imaginations, seduced it, and defeated it. The wall was so paralyzingly vast and sheer that its top, bottom, and sides passed away beyond the reach of sight. The mere shock of vertigo could kill a man. The wall appeared perfectly flat. It would take the finest laser measuring equipment to detect that as it climbed apparently to infinity, as it dropped dizzyingly away, as it planed out to either side, it also curved. It met itself again 13 light seconds away. In other words, the wall formed the inside of a hollow sphere. A sphere over 3 million miles across and flooded with unimaginable light. "Welcome," said Slarty Bartfast, as the tiny speck that was the air car, traveling now at 3 times the speed of sound, crept imperceptibly forward into the mind-boggling space. "Welcome," he said, "to our factory floor." Arthur stared about him in a kind of wonderful horror. Ranged away before them at a distance he could neither judge nor even guess at, were a series of curious suspensions, delicate traceries of metal and light hung about shadowy spherical shapes that hung in space.
"This," said Slarty Bartfast, "is where we make most of our planets, you see."
"You mean," said Arthur, trying to form words,
"You mean you're starting it up again now?" No, good heavens, no," exclaimed the old man. "No, the galaxy isn't nearly rich enough to support us yet. No, we've been awakened to perform just one extraordinary commission for very special clients from another dimension. It may interest you. There, in the distance in front of us."
Arthur followed the old man's finger till he was able to pick out the floating structure he was pointing at. It was indeed the only one of the many structures that betrayed any signs of activity about it, though this was more subliminal impression than anything one could put one's finger on. At that moment, however, a flash of light arced through the structure and revealed in stark relief the patterns that were formed on the dark sphere within. Patterns that Arthur knew. Rough, blobby shapes that were as familiar to him as the shapes of words. Part of the furniture of his mind. For a few seconds, he sat in stunned silence as the images rushed around his mind and tried to find something to settle down and make sense. Part of his brain told him that he knew perfectly well what he was looking at and what the shapes represented, while another quite sensibly refused. Welcome in, Raiders. Pull up a chair. Part of his brain told him that he knew perfectly well what he was looking at and what the shapes represented, while another quite sensibly refused to countenance the idea and abdicated responsibility for any further thinking in that direction. The flash came again, and this time there could be no doubt.
"The Earth,"
whispered Arthur.
"Well, the Earth Mark II, in fact,"
said Slarty Bartfast cheerfully.
"We're making a copy from our original blueprints."
There was a pause.
"Are you trying to tell me," said Arthur slowly and with control, "that you originally made the Earth?" "Oh, yes," said Slarty Bartfast. "Did you ever go to a place, I think it was called Norway?"
"No," said Arthur. "No, I don't think I did."
"Pity," said Slarty Bartfast. "That was one of mine. Won an award. You know, lovely crinkly edges. I was most upset to hear of its destruction."
"You were upset?"
"Yes. 5 minutes later, it wouldn't have mattered. It was quite a shocking cock-up."
"Huh?"
"The mice were furious."
"The mice were furious?"
"Oh, yes," said the old man mildly.
"Yeah, well, I expect were the dogs, cats, duck-billed platypuses, but..."
"Ah, but they hadn't paid for it, you see, had they?"
"Look," said Arthur, "would it save you a lot of time if I just gave up and went mad now?" For a while, the air car flew along in awkward silence. The old man tried patiently to explain.
"Earthman, the planet you lived on was commissioned, paid for, and run by mice. It was destroyed 5 minutes before the completion of the purpose for which it was built. And we've got to build another one."
Only one word was registering with Arthur. "Mice," he said.
"Indeed, Earthman."
"Look,
Sorry, are we talking about little white furry things with cheese fixation and women standing on tables screaming an early 60s sitcom?
Slarty Bartfast coughed politely.
Earthman,
He said,
it is sometimes hard to follow your mode of speech. Remember, I have been asleep inside this planet of Magrathea for 5 million years, and know little of these early 60s sitcoms of which you speak. These creatures you call mice, you see, are not quite as they appear. They're merely the protrusion into our dimensions of vastly hyper-intelligent pan-dimensional beings. The whole business with cheese and squeaking is just a front.
The old man paused and, with a sympathetic frown, continued.
They've been experimenting on you, I'm afraid.
Arthur thought about this for a second, and then his face cleared.
Oh no, he said. I see the source of the misunderstanding now. Look, you see, what happened was that we used to do experiments on them. They were often used in behavioral research, Pavlov, and all that sort of stuff. So what happened was that the white mice would be all set with all sorts of tests, learn to ring bells, run around mazes, and things like that. The whole nature of learning process could be examined. From our observational behaviors, we were able to learn all sorts of things about our own.
Arthur's voice trailed off.
Such subtlety,
said Slarty Bartfast.
One has to admire it.
What?
Said Arthur.
How better to disguise your real nature, how better to guide your thinking, suddenly running down a maze the wrong way, eating the wrong bit of cheese, unexpectedly dropping dead of myxomatosis. It's as if finely calculated cumulative effect is enormous.
He paused for effect.
You see, Earthman, they really are particularly clever, hyper-intelligent, pan-dimensional beings. Your planet and people have formed a matrix of an organic computer running a 10 million year program. Let me tell you the whole story. It'll take a little time.
Time, said Arthur weakly, is not currently one of my problems. Chapter 25. There are, of course, many problems connected with life, of which some of the most popular are: where are people born? Why do they die? Why do they want to spend so much of the intervening time wearing digital watches? Many, many millions of years ago, a race of hyper-intelligent, pan-dimensional beings, whose physical manifestation in their own pan-dimensional universe is not dissimilar to our own, got so fed up with the constant bickering about the meaning of life, which used to interrupt their favorite pastimes of brokey and ultra cricket. It's a curious game which involves suddenly hitting people for no readily apparent reason and then running away again, that they decided to sit down and solve their problem once and for all. And to this end, they built themselves a stupendous supercomputer, which was so amazingly intelligent that even before its databanks had been connected up, it had started from, I think, therefore I am, and got as far as deducing the existence of rice pudding and the income tax before anyone had managed to turn it off. It was the size of a small city. Its main console was installed in a specifically designed executive office, mounted on an enormous executive desk of the finest ultra mahogany, topped with ultra red leather. The dark carpeting was discreetly sumptuous. Exotic pot plants and tastefully engraved prints of the principal computer programmers and their families were deployed liberally around the room, and stately windows looked out upon a tree-lined public square. On the day of the great on-turning, two soberly dressed programmers with briefcases arrived and were shown discreetly into the office. They were aware that this day they would represent their entire race in the greatest moment, but they conducted themselves calmly and quietly as they seated themselves differentially before the desk, opened the briefcases, and took out their leather-bound notebooks. Their names were Lunkwill and Fook. For a few moments they sat in respective silence. Then, after exchanging a quiet glance with Fook, Lunkwill leaned forward and touched a small black panel. The subtlest of hums indicated that the massive computer was now in total active mode. After a pause, it spoke to them in a voice rich, resonant, and deep. It said, "What is the great task for which I, Deep Thought, the second greatest computer in the universe of time and space, have been called into existence?" Lunkwill and Fook glanced at each other in surprise.
No, wait a minute, this isn't right, said Lunkwill, worried. We distinctly designed this computer to be the greatest one ever, and we're not making do with second best. Deep Thought, he addressed the computer. Are you not, as we designed you to be, the greatest, most powerful computer of all time?
I described myself as the second greatest, intoned Deep Thought, and such I am. Another worried look passed between the two programmers. Lunkwill cleared his throat.
There must be some mistake, he said. Are you not a greater computer than the milliard gargantua brain at Maximilian, which can count all the atoms in a star in a millisecond?
The milliard gargantua brain, said Deep Thought with unconcealed contempt. A mere abacus. Mention it not.
And are you not, said Fook, leaning anxiously forward, a greater analyst than the Googleplex star thinker in the seventh galaxy of light and ingenuity, which can calculate the trajectory of every single dust particle throughout a 5-week Dagobah beta sand blizzard?
A 5-week sand blizzard, said Deep Thought haughtily. You ask this of me, who have contemplated the very vectors of the atoms and the Big Bang itself. Molest me not with this pocket calculator stuff.
The two programmers sat uncomfortably silent for a moment. Then Lunkwill leaned forward again. But are you not, he said, more fiendish disputant than the great hyperbolic omnicognate neutron wrangler of Synchronos 12, the magic and indefatigable?
The great hyperbolic omnicognate neutron wrangler, said Deep Thought, thoroughly rolling the R's, could talk all 4 legs off an Arcturian mega donkey, but only I could persuade it to go for a walk afterwards.
Then what, asked Fook, is the problem?
There is no problem, said Deep Thought with magnificent ringing tones. I am simply the second greatest computer in the universe of space and time.
But the second, insisted Lunkwill. Why do you keep saying the second? You are surely not thinking of the multi-corded perspectron Titan Muller, are you? Or the Pondermatic, or the...
Contemptuous lights flooded across the console. I spare not a single unit of thought on these cybernetic simpletons, he boomed. I speak of none but the computer that is to come after me. Fook was losing patience. He pushed his notebook aside and muttered, I think this is getting us needlessly messianic.
You know nothing of future time.
You know nothing of future time, pronounced Deep Thought, and yet in my teeming circuits I can navigate the infinite delta streams of future probabilities and see there must one day come a computer whose merest operational parameters I am not worthy to calculate, but which will be my fate to eventually design.
Fook sighed heavily, glanced across to Lunkwell. Can we get on with the ask the question? He said. Lunkwell motioned him to wait. What computer is this of which you speak? He asked.
I will speak no further in this present time, said Deep Thought. Now ask of me what else you will that I might function. Speak.
They shrugged at each other. Fook composed himself. Oh, Deep Thought computer, he said. The task we have designed for you to perform is this. We want you to tell us, he paused, the answer.
The answer? Said Deep Thought. The answer to what?
Life, urged Fook. The universe, said Lunkwell. Everything, they said in chorus. Deep Thought paused for a moment's reflection.
Tricky, he said finally.
But can you do it?
Again, a significant pause. Yes, said Deep Thought. I can do it.
There's an answer, said Fook with breathless excitement. A simple answer, said Lunkwell.
Yes, said Deep Thought. Life, the universe, and everything, there is an answer, but, he added, I'll have to think on it.
A sudden commotion destroyed the moment. The doors flew open, and two angry men wearing the coarse, faded blue robes and belts of the Crookswan University burst into the room, thrusting aside the ineffectual flunkies who tried to bar their way. We demand admission, shouted the younger of the two men, elbowing a pretty young secretary in the throat. Come on, shouted the older one. You can't keep us out. He pushed a junior programmer back through the door. We demand you can't keep us out, bawled the younger one, though he was now firmly inside the room and no further attempts were being made to stop him. Who are you? Said Lunkwell, raising from his seat. What do you want? I am Magic Thief, announced the older one. And I demand that I'm Vroomfundle, shouted the younger one. Magic Thief turned on Vroomfundle. It's all right, he explained angrily. You don't need to demand that. All right, bawled Vroomfelder, banging on a nearby desk. I'm Vroomfelder, and that is not a demand. That is a solid fact. What I demand is solid facts. No, we don't, exclaimed the Magic Thief in irritation. This is precisely what we don't demand. Scarcely pausing for breath, Vroomfelder shouted, We don't demand solid facts. We demand a total absence of solid facts. I demand that I may or may not be Vroomfundle. But who the devil are you? Exclaimed an outraged folk. We, said Magic Thief, are philosophers. There we may not be, said Vroomfundle, waving a warning finger at the programmers. Yes, we are, insisted Magic Thief. We are quite definitely here representing the amalgamated union of philosophers, sages, luminaries, and other thinking persons, and we want this machine turned off. We want it off now. What's the problem? Said Lunkwell. I'll tell you what the problem is, mate, said Magic Thief. Demarcation, that's the problem. We demand, yelled Vroomfundle, that demarcation may or may not be the problem. You just let that machine go on with the adding up, warned, and we'll take care of the eternal verities. Thank you very much. You want to check your legal position? You do, mate. Under the law of quest for the ultimate truth, it is quite clear the inalienable prerogative of your working thinkers. Any bloody machine going and actually finding it. We're straight out of a job, aren't we? I mean, what's the use of us sitting up half the night arguing there is a God or there isn't a God or whatnot if this machine goes and gives you the bleeding phone number the next morning? That's right, shouted Broomfeld. We demand rigidly defined areas of doubt and uncertainty.
Suddenly, a stentorian voice boomed from across the room. "Might I make an observation at this point?" inquired Deep Thought.
We'll go on straight, yelled Broomfendel. That's right,
agreed Magic Dees.
You'll have a national philosopher strike on your hand.
The hum level in the room suddenly increased as several ancillary bass driver units, mounted in sedately carved and varnished cabinet speakers around the room, cut in to give Deep Thought's voice a little more power. "All I wanted to say," bellowed the computer, "is that my circuits are now irrevocably commanded to calculating the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything." He paused and satisfied himself that he now had everyone's attention in the room before continuing on more quietly. "But the program will take me a little while to run." Fook glanced impatiently at his watch.
"How long?"
he said. 7.5 million years, said Deep Thought. Lunkwell and Fook blinked at each other.
7.5 million years?
They cried in universe. "Yes," said Deep Thought. "I said I'd have to think about it, didn't I? And it occurred to me that running a program like this is bound to create an enormous amount of popular publicity for whole areas of philosophy in general. Everyone's going to want to have their own theories about what answer I'm eventually going to come up with, and who better to capitalize on that media market than you yourselves. So long as you can keep disagreeing with each other violently enough and maligning each other in popular press, so as long as you have clever agents, you can keep yourselves on the gravy train for life. How does that sound?" The two philosophers gaped at him.
"Bloody hell," said Magic Thief. "Now that I think about what I'm calling it here, Room Bundle. Why do we never think of things like this?"
"Dunno," said Vroomfondle in an awed whisper.
"Think our brains may be too highly trained, Magic Thief."
So saying, they turned on their heels and walked out the door into a lifestyle beyond their wildest dreams. Let's see. All right, we got room for the next two chapters, and then that's going to be it for tonight. So, Chapter 26. Yes, very salutary, said Arthur after Slarty Bartfast had related the salient points of the story to him. "But I don't understand what all this has got to do with Earth and mice and things."
"That is but the first half of the story, Earthman,"
said the old man.
"If you would care to discover what happened 7.5 million years later, on the great day of the answer, allow me to invite you to my study, where you can experience the events yourself on our sense-o-tape records. That is, unless you would care to take a quick stroll on the surface of New Earth. It's only half completed, I'm afraid. We haven't even finished burying the artificial dinosaur skeletons in the crust yet. Then we have the tertiary, quaternary periods of the Cenozoic era to lay down, and—"
"No, thank you," said Arthur. "It wouldn't quite be the same."
"No," said Slarty Bartfast, "it would not.
and he turned the aircar around and headed back towards the mind-numbing wall. Slarty Bartfoss's study was a total mess. Like the results of an explosion in the public library, the old man frowned as they stepped in.
Terribly unfortunate, he said. A diode blew in one of the life support computers when we tried to revive our cleaning staff. We discovered that they'd been dead for nearly 30,000 years. Who's going to clear away the bodies now? That's what I want to know. Look, why don't you sit yourself down over there and let me plug you in?
He gestured Arthur towards a chair which looked as if it had been made out of a ribcage of a stegosaurus.
It was made of the ribcage of a stegosaurus,
explained the old man as he pottered about, fishing bits of wire from underneath tottering piles of paper and drawing instruments.
Here, he said, hold these,
and passed a couple of stripped wire ends to Arthur. The instant he took a hold of them, a bird flew straight through him. He was suspended in midair and totally invisible to himself. Beneath him was a pretty tree-lined city square. All around it, as far as the eye could see, were white concrete buildings of airy, spacious design, but somewhat the worse for wear. Many were cracked and stained with rain. Today, however, the sun was shining. A fresh breeze danced lightly through the trees, and the odd sensation that all the buildings were quietly humming was probably caused by the fact that the square and all the streets around it were thronged with cheerful, excited people. Somewhere a band was playing. Brightly colored flags were fluttering in the breeze, and the spirit of carnival was in the air. Arthur felt extraordinarily lonely, stuck up in the air above it all, without so much as a body to his name. But before he had time to reflect on this, a voice rang out across the square and called for everyone's attention. A man standing on the brightly dressed dais before the building, which clearly dominated a square, was addressing the crowd over a tannoy.
"O people who wait in the shadows of deep thought," he cried out. "Honored descendants of Vroomvandel and Magictis, the greatest, most truly interesting pundits in the universe has ever known, the time of waiting is over."
Wild cheers broke out amongst the crowd. Flags, streamers, wolf whistles sailed through the air. The narrow streets looked rather like centipedes rolling over on their back and frantically waving their legs in the air.
7.5 million years our race has waited for this great day, and hopefully enlightening day,
cried the cheerleaders.
The day of the answer.
Hurrahs burst from the ecstatic crowd.
Never again, cried the man, never again will we wake up in the morning and think, who am I? What is my purpose in life? Does it, cosmically speaking, matter if I don't get up and go to work? For today, we will finally learn once and for all the plain and simple answer to all of these nagging little problems of life, the universe, and everything.
As the crowd erupted once again, Arthur found himself gliding through the air, down towards the large, stately windows on the first floor of the building, behind a dais from which the speaker was addressing the crowd. He experienced a moment's panic as he sailed straight towards the window, which passed when a second or so later he found he had gone right through the solid glass without apparently touching it. No one in the room remarked on his particular arrival, which is hardly surprising as he wasn't actually there. He began to realize that the whole experience was merely a recorded projection, which knocked 6-track 70 millimeters into a cocked hat. The room was much as Slarty Bartfast had described it. In 7.5 million years, it had been well looked after, cleaned regularly, even a century or so. The ultra mahogany desk was worn on the edges, the carpets a little faded now, but the large computer terminal sat in sparkling glory on the desk's top, as bright as if it had been constructed yesterday. Two severely dressed men sat respectfully before the terminal and waited.
"The time is nearly upon us,"
one said. And Arthur was surprised to see a word suddenly materializing in thin air just by the man's neck. The word was Lunqual. And it flashed a couple of times and disappeared. Again, before Arthur was able to assimilate this, the other man spoke, the word Fogue, appearing by his neck.
70,000 generations ago, our ancestors set this program in motion,
the second man said.
And in all that time, we will be the first to hear the computer speak. An awesome prospect, Food,
agreed the first man. And Arthur suddenly realized he was watching a recording with subtitles.
We, who are the ones who will hear, said Bogue, the answer to the greatest question of life, the universe, and everything.
Shh, said Lunqual with a slight gesture.
I think Deep Thought is preparing to speak.
There was a moment's expectant pause while panels slowly came to light. On the front of the console, lights flashed on and off experimentally and settled down into a businesslike pattern. A soft, low hum came from the communication channel. "Good morning," said Deep Thought at last.
Good morning, oh Deep Thought. Do you have, that is,
an answer for you? Yes, I have. The two men shivered in expectancy. Their waiting had not been in vain.
There really is one.
There really is one, confirmed Deep Thought.
To everything, the great question of life, the universe, and everything.
Yes. Both of the men had been trained for this moment. Their lives had been a preparation for it. They had been selected at birth as those who would witness the answer. But even so, they found themselves gasping, squirming like excited little children.
Are you ready to give us the answer?
Urged Lunqual. I am.
No.
Now, said Deep Thought. They both licked their dry lips. Though I don't think that you're really going to like it.
Doesn't matter,
said Folk.
We must know it.
Now?
Yes, now.
All right, said the computer and settled into silence again. The two men fidgeted. The tension was unbearable. You're really not going to like it, observed Deep Thought.
Tell us.
All right, said Deep Thought. The answer to the great question.
Yes.
Of life, the universe, and everything, said Deep Thought.
Yes.
Is, said Deep Thought, and paused.
Yes.
Is.
Yes.
42, said Deep Thought, with infinite majesty and calm. And that will bring us to the end of chapter 27, and where we will stop for tonight. We will pick up chapter 28 and the culmination of this book next week on Sunday here. I hope you guys have been enjoying your little story. I have been having a blast and enjoying it. it's been a nice quiet way to wind down this weekend after our bit of chaos on the Denmark server. So it's been a good time. So we are going to I'm going to find my buttons. Hang on here, because what we'll do now is we're going to go to our ending screen. We will go find a fabulous person to go say hi to and rate out. If you've been enjoying the book, do let me know. And if you are feeling like you've missed out on some of the chapters or anything, feel free to check out the VODs. There's only been like 2 other ones that have done before this. So you're not missing too terribly much, but you can go watch those other 2 streams. Like I said, I think we have 1 more, and that will finish us out for this particular book. So I hope you all had a fantastic time. All right, is this thing actually going to load up now? Wow, trying to get something to work for a change. But we're also going to see who's out there to go send some happy-go-lucky moments out to and say hi to. But for now, don't go anywhere. All right. And with that, I'm sitting there looking around to see if there's any friends or any other fabulous people that I know that are currently up and streaming right now. I don't see too many of them. It's a shame. I'd love to send you guys over to go visit somebody that we know and love. It's a little hard to go find somebody else who's currently reading a book on stream right now. So I think, let's see, we have... All right, so we have 2 people that I know. I tell you what, I'm going to let you guys pick your poison on this one. So you can have some more Valheim if you would like, because Red Fairy is currently running some Valheim. Night Mystique is doing some Sims 4, if you would like to go watch some Sims playing. Or Vidiot Fringe is currently doing Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. So I'm going to leave it up to you guys to decide where you want to go hang out with. Or if you want to go look for something new, we can go find a new friend. Somebody just pick a destination. What are you in the mood for watching? It's been a nice, quiet, chill stream. I realized that I ran this whole one without any background music. So I do apologize for those that have gotten a little accustomed to that. Dealer's choice. Haven't seen a night raid in a while? Okay. Well, then I guess it's going to be a night raid then. Let's make certain that they're actually still playing and not looking to wrap up. Nope. Looks like night is on the way out the door too. So, all right. I guess that takes that one out of the equation. So, Valheim or Sekiro? Sekiro is kind of like a Elden Ring in medieval Japan. If anybody's not familiar with that game. What is Red Fairy doing? Oh, Red Fairy's doing some cake decorating. Yeah. Knight's doing a weird thing. Yeah. All right. We can go do some cake decorating. That's not too bad. Whichever I choose. Well, it's going to be... if it's my choice, then I'm going to go visit Vidiot Fringe, because I've actually been watching him do this Sekiro. It's actually not a bad game to watch the movements on. You probably wouldn't mind it so much there, Squirrel, as it is kind of from the same perspective as Valheim. So it's not something. It's something you can actually watch without getting motion sickness. So let's go do that. Let me find my little buttons. We'll kick this raid out. Shadows die twice. Yo, Vidiot, how long you been doing this? Oof. All right. Here we go. As always, it's been an absolute pleasure and a good time. And I look forward to the next time. We will be back here tomorrow. Tomorrow is not going to be Minecraft. I know the schedule says Minecraft. We are not doing Minecraft tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be a special surprise. So I will see you all tomorrow. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Have a fantastic start of your week. And I hope you all have a wonderful night's rest.